What if I told you that buried in one of the oldest apocalyptic texts ever written lies a cosmic secret that once divided ancient Israel into warring factions over something as seemingly mundane as a calendar? Not just any calendar, but a blueprint of the heavens themselves, a timekeeping system that its keepers believed was dictated by angels and written into the fabric of creation. Here's the paradox. While the priests of Jerusalem's temple oriented their entire religious life around a lunar calendar, tracking new moons, celebrating festivals when the crescent appeared, synchronizing worship with the cycles of Earth's nearest celestial companion, a rival group possessed texts describing a completely different temporal order. Their calendar had exactly 364 days, not 365, not the lunar year's 354, but 364, 52 perfect weeks, a system so geometrically pure that every festival fell on the same day of the week, every year, forever. This wasn't a minor theological disagreement. This was cosmological warfare. Because in the ancient world, time wasn't just measurement, it was law. To follow the wrong calendar meant celebrating festivals on the wrong days, offering sacrifices at the wrong hours, living fundamentally out of sync with divine order itself. You weren't just mistaken, you were cosmically disobedient. Picture this: a man named Enoch, the mysterious biblical figure who walked with God and was taken up without dying, stands at the edge of the world. Before him, an angelic being of fire, Uriel, whose name means God is my light, the celestial overseer of astronomy itself, opens gates in the firmament. Through these portals, Enoch watches the sun march through 12 cosmic doorways, each aligned to the months. He sees the moon wax and wane through 18 gates, its phases choreographed with mathematical precision. He witnesses stars rising and setting in ordained paths, none deviating from their celestial roots. And Uriel tells him, this is the true order. This is how the cosmos actually works. This is what the temple has forgotten. The text containing this vision is called the Astronomical Book, the oldest section of the larger Book of Enoch, likely composed sometime between the 3rd and 2nd centuries BCE. For the community at Qumran, the isolated sect near the Dead Sea, who preserved these texts, this wasn't mythology or speculation. This was revealed science, divine astronomy, the architecture of reality itself. They staked their entire religious identity on this calendar, separating themselves from the rest of Judaism, living as cosmic exiles in their own land. But here's what makes this story urgent for us today. We live in an age that has lost all connection to cosmic rhythm. Our time is digital, artificial, endlessly accelerated. We work around the clock. Seasons dissolve into climate chaos. The night sky vanishes under light pollution. We've gained precision, atomic clocks measuring nanoseconds, but lost meaning. We know exactly what time it is and have no idea what time means. Today, we're going to explore one of the strangest and most profound documents from ancient Judaism, a text that tried to encode the divine order of the universe into a calendar, that saw astronomy as theology and timekeeping as worship. We'll journey through the gates of heaven with Enoch, examine why this calendar became the center of a religious civil war, investigate whether stars and planets could actually sin, compare Hebrew cosmology with Babylonian and Egyptian astronomy, and ask what it means to recover sacred time in an age that has forgotten the cosmos entirely. This is the story of the Astronomical Book, a lost Hebrew cosmology that believed time itself was a moral force, and that to know the heavens was to know the mind of God. The Book of Enoch doesn't ease you into its vision, it thrusts you immediately into otherworldly terrain. Enoch, the antediluvian patriarch who appears briefly in Genesis as the man who walked with God, and he was not, for God took him, becomes in this text something far more elaborate, a cosmic tourist, a prophet granted access to the hidden mechanics of creation. The Astronomical Book, which scholars designate as 1 Enoch chapters 72 to 82, opens with Enoch receiving instruction from Uriel, an archangel barely mentioned in canonical scripture, but central to apocalyptic literature. Uriel is the angel of cosmic fire, the guardian of thunder and earthquakes, the overseer of celestial luminaries. He's the one who shows Enoch how the universe actually functions beneath its visible surface. And what Enoch sees is this: the sky is not an empty dome. It's a complex architectural structure, a vast machine with gates and portals through which celestial bodies travel on precise, ordained paths. The sun moves through 12 gates, 6 in the east where it rises, 6 in the west where it sets. Each month the sun shifts to a new gate, creating the progression of seasons. In the summer months, it rises through the northernmost gates, traveling its longest arc across the sky. In winter, it emerges from southern gates, tracing its shortest path. This isn't metaphor. The text describes these portals with architectural specificity, measuring angles and distances, documenting the sun's journey with the precision of an ancient astronomical treatise. But why gates? Why describe celestial motion as passage through cosmic doorways rather than simple orbital mechanics? Because in the ancient Near Eastern imagination, order requires boundaries. Chaos is unbounded. Creation imposes structure. The gates ensure that each luminary travels only where it should, when it should. They're not just descriptive, they're prescriptive. They enforce cosmic law. The moon receives even more complex treatment. It moves through 18 gates, 9 in the east, 9 in the west, and its path changes daily as it waxes and wanes. The text describes the moon's light not as reflected sunlight, but as its own luminescence, governed by its own internal schedule. During the new moon, it possesses no light at all. On the first day of its cycle, 1/14 of its surface illuminates. Day by day, the fraction increases until the full moon shines with complete radiance, all 14 parts illuminated. Then the process reverses, darkness consuming the moon's face until it vanishes entirely, only to begin again. 14 parts, not 12, not 16, 14. The precision matters because this is how the text generates its calendar. Months are measured by the moon's phases, but the year is measured by the sun's path. And here's where the calendar's revolutionary mathematics emerge. The solar year contains exactly 364 days, 12 months of 30 days each, plus 4 additional days inserted at the cardinal points, equinoxes, and solstices. 52 perfect weeks. Every year begins on the same day of the week. Every festival falls on the same date, the same day, in perpetual cycle. Why would this matter so intensely? Here's the question that drives everything. If God created the cosmos with mathematical perfection, shouldn't sacred time reflect that perfection? The lunar year, with its 354 days, requires periodic intercalation, adding extra months to keep festivals aligned with seasons. It's messy, human, requiring priestly calculation and adjustment. But a 364-day year is autonomous, self-correcting, pristine. It embeds the sacred directly into cosmic motion. Enoch doesn't just observe this system, he records it. Uriel commands him to write down the laws of the luminaries, to preserve this knowledge for future generations, particularly for those living in the last days, when, the text suggests, humanity will have forgotten the true order of creation. The vision frames itself as revelation for a future moment of cosmic amnesia, a time capsule of astronomical theology waiting for rediscovery. But there's something else happening in these chapters, something that transforms astronomy into something stranger. The text doesn't only describe how the heavens move, it describes how they're supposed to move and warns about what happens when they deviate. It speaks of stars that transgress their ordained paths, luminaries that fail to appear at their appointed times, celestial disorder as moral failure. The cosmos isn't just a machine, it's a system of agents with responsibilities, and those agents can fail. Which raises an unsettling question. Can stars sin? We'll return to that. But first, we need to understand why this calendar became the center of one of ancient Judaism's most bitter conflicts. A dispute that wasn't about astronomy at all, but about who possessed the authority to declare when God wanted to be worshipped, and whether time itself could be corrupted. By the 2nd century BCE, the question of the proper calendar had become the fault line dividing Jewish religious communities. This wasn't a debate happening in ivory towers or scholarly academies. It was visceral, existential, lived in the flesh, by communities making radically different choices about when to celebrate Passover, when to observe Yom Kippur, when to offer sacrifices, when to rest on Sabbath. And because these holy days were commanded by God, celebrating them at the wrong time wasn't a scheduling error. It was a violation of covenant, a fundamental breach of the relationship between Israel and the divine. The Jerusalem temple operated on a lunisolar calendar, a system inherited from Babylonian astronomy and refined over centuries of practice. Priests watched for the new moon's first crescent, and its appearance triggered the start of a new month. This method had ancient pedigree and practical advantages. Anyone could observe the moon. It was communal, verifiable, tied to a celestial marker, visible throughout the Near East. Festivals like Passover fell on the 15th of the lunar month, when the full moon illuminated the night sky, creating a natural synchrony between sacred time and celestial display. But for the community at Qumran, the group that preserved the Dead Sea Scrolls, this entire system was corrupted. Their texts, including multiple copies of the Astronomical Book, reveal a community committed to the 364-day solar calendar described in Enoch's vision. They believed the lunar calendar was a human innovation, possibly borrowed from Gentile nations, certainly not the original order established at creation. For them, the temple priests weren't just following a different system, they were leading Israel into cosmic disobedience. What was at stake here? Everything. The Qumran community's foundational texts, including the Damascus document and the community rule, frame their entire existence as a separation from the sons of darkness, which explicitly includes the Jerusalem priesthood. They refer to themselves as keepers of the true calendar, observers of the authentic festivals, practitioners of correct worship, while the rest of Israel flounders in temporal chaos. They held their festivals on different days than Jerusalem. When the temple celebrated Passover, Qumran would have already observed it or had yet to reach it. They were living in a different temporal reality, a parallel religious year. Why did they stake so much on this? The answer lies in how ancient Judaism understood the relationship between cosmos, law, and worship. The Torah commands Israel to observe feasts at their appointed times. But appointed by whom, according to what reckoning? The temple argued that the appointed times were determined by priestly observation and communal consensus. Qumran argued that the times were fixed eternally in the structure of creation itself, revealed to Enoch before the flood, encoded in celestial motion, and only accessible through special revelation. This is why the Astronomical Book was so important to them. It wasn't an astronomy textbook. It was a legal document, a cosmic Torah, proof that their calendar bore divine authority. When they read that Uriel showed Enoch the gates of heaven and explained the sun's path, they understood this as God giving Moses the 10 Commandments, direct revelation of divine law, not subject to human interpretation or adjustment. But here's what makes this conflict tragic. Both calendars were trying to solve real astronomical problems, and both failed in their own ways. The lunar year of 354 days falls short of the solar year, creating seasonal drift unless you add periodic intercalary months. The temple's solution was pragmatic, but required constant human intervention, priestly authority deciding when and how to adjust. Qumran's 364-day calendar was mathematically elegant, but also short of the actual solar year, approximately 365.25 days, meaning their seasons would gradually drift as well, though more slowly. Their calendar wasn't more accurate, it was more perfect, at least symbolically. Neither side could actually synchronize lunar months, solar years, and sacred festivals without some mechanism of adjustment. But they made different choices about which kind of imperfection they could tolerate. The temple chose flexible pragmatism. Qumran chose rigid idealism. And the result was schism. What were the real-world consequences? The Qumran community lived in voluntary exile, establishing a settlement in the Judean wilderness where they could follow their calendar without compromise. They saw themselves as priests in waiting, preserving the true worship for a future moment when the corrupt temple would be destroyed, and they would return to Jerusalem to establish correct practice. They were temporal refugees, exiled not from space, but from time itself, waiting for the cosmos to vindicate their calendar. But this raises a disturbing question. What if both were wrong? What if the entire premise that there exists one true calendar divinely ordained and cosmically authoritative was the problem? What if time, as experienced by humans, is inherently multiple, contextual, constructed through practice, rather than discovered in the stars? The ancient texts don't consider this possibility. For them, time is singular, cosmic, binding. To live in wrong time is to live in wrong relationship with reality itself. Which brings us to perhaps the strangest dimension of the Astronomical Book's vision: the idea that celestial bodies themselves could transgress, that stars and planets bore moral responsibility for their movements, and that cosmic disorder wasn't just physical, but ethical. Could the heavens themselves fall into sin? One of the most philosophically provocative dimensions of the Astronomical Book is its treatment of celestial bodies, not merely as objects, but as agents, beings with responsibilities, roles, and the capacity for obedience or transgression. This isn't simply poetic personification. The text describes stars that do not come forth at their appointed times as transgressors against cosmic law, and promises that they shall be judged for their failures. Listen to how 1 Enoch 80 frames this. In the days of the sinners the years shall be shortened, and many heads of the stars in command shall go astray. And these shall change their courses and their activities, and not appear at the times which have been prescribed for them. This is astronomical apocalypticism, the idea that cosmic disorder reflects and reinforces moral disorder, that when stars deviate from their paths, something has gone fundamentally wrong, not just with physics, but with ethics. The heavens are supposed to be exemplars of obedience, their regular motion, their predictable paths, their adherence to divine command. This is what makes them worthy of wonder. When they fail, the order of creation itself trembles. But what could it possibly mean for a star to sin? They're not conscious beings making choices. They don't have will or agency in the way humans do. How can you hold a celestial body morally responsible? The answer lies in ancient Near Eastern cosmology's fundamental assumptions. In Hebrew thought, influenced by but distinct from Babylonian and Egyptian models, the cosmos is governed not by impersonal forces but by divine command. God speaks, and the sun rises. God ordains, and seasons turn. The heavens obey, not because they're programmed, but because they're responsive to divine authority. Psalm 19 captures this perfectly. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky proclaims the work of his hands. Day to day pours out speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. Speech, knowledge, revelation. The cosmos isn't mute machinery. It's testimony, witness, declaration. And if it can declare truth, it can presumably fail to declare truth. If it can witness to divine order, it can presumably witness falsely through disorder. The Astronomical Book takes this further by linking celestial motion directly to angelic administration. Stars don't move autonomously. They're guided by angels assigned as their overseers. Uriel governs the sun, moon, and stellar luminaries. Other angels manage winds, seasons, natural phenomena. When the text speaks of stars transgressing, It may actually be describing the failure of their angelic administrators, angels who deviate from their assigned tasks, who allow disorder to creep into creation. This connects the Astronomical Book to the larger Enochic tradition, particularly the Book of the Watchers, 1 Enoch 1-36, which tells the story of angels who descended to earth, took human wives, taught forbidden knowledge, and corrupted the world. That narrative is about vertical transgression, angels crossing boundaries between heaven and earth. The Astronomical Book's concern is horizontal transgression, movement within the proper sphere, but outside the proper path. Deviation not from assigned location, but from assigned schedule. Both are about borders. Both are about the catastrophic consequences of crossing divinely ordained boundaries. And both suggest that evil isn't something that enters creation from outside. It's the corruption of created order from within, agents given authority who abuse it, boundaries given as gift that are experienced as constraint and therefore violated. Here's why this matters for the calendar conflict. If the cosmos itself can fall into disobedience, then human timekeeping must be even more vulnerable. If stars guided by angels can deviate from their paths, how much more easily can human priests, guided by tradition and observation, deviate from the true calendar? Qumran's solar calendar becomes, in this framework, an anchor against cosmic chaos, a fixed point, revealed directly by angelic authority, resistant to the kind of corruption that even the stars can experience. But there's a dark implication here. If cosmic order is moral law, and deviation is sin, then what happens to human freedom? What happens to adaptation, flexibility, cultural context? The Astronomical Book's vision is magnificent in its certainty, but terrifying in its rigidity. It offers a cosmos where everything has its place, its time, its ordained path. But it's also a cosmos where deviation of any kind is transgression, where difference is disorder, where change itself might be a kind of fall. This tension between the beauty of cosmic order and the tyranny of cosmic law runs through all apocalyptic literature. It promises a universe of meaning, where nothing is arbitrary, where even the stars declare divine glory. But it threatens a universe without grace, where getting the festival date wrong isn't a minor error, but a cosmic crime. Which brings us to a crucial question. Was the Astronomical Book actually describing astronomy as ancient people observed it? Or was it using astronomical imagery to encode something else? Mystical knowledge, sectarian identity, esoteric revelation. To answer that, we need to step outside the world of Jewish apocalypticism and examine how other ancient cultures understood the relationship between celestial motion and divine order. To understand the Astronomical Book, we need to place it within the broader landscape of ancient Near Eastern astronomy. The text didn't emerge from a cultural vacuum. By the 3rd and 2nd centuries BCE, when this material was composed, sophisticated astronomical traditions had been developing for over 1,000 years in Mesopotamia and Egypt. The question isn't whether Hebrew cosmology knew about these traditions. It's how it adapted, transformed, or rejected them. Start with Babylon. Mesopotamian astronomy was the most mathematically sophisticated system in the ancient world. By the 7th century BCE, Babylonian astronomers could predict lunar eclipses, calculate planetary positions, and track celestial cycles with remarkable accuracy. They developed the zodiac, divided the sky into 12 regions, and created mathematical models for planetary motion that remained unsurpassed until the Hellenistic period. Their astronomical diaries, preserved on cuneiform tablets, recorded observations spanning centuries, creating an empirical database that later Hellenistic and Islamic astronomers would build upon. But Babylonian astronomy wasn't purely empirical or secular. It was deeply embedded in divination and omen interpretation. The movements of celestial bodies were signs from the gods, messages requiring expert interpretation by scribes trained in complex protocols. A lunar eclipse didn't just happen. It meant something, usually something ominous for the king or kingdom. The same mathematical precision that allowed Babylonians to predict celestial events also enabled them to prepare rituals to avert the disasters those events signified. Now compare this with the Astronomical Book. The Hebrew text shares certain structural features with Babylonian astronomy: the division of the year into months, attention to solstices and equinoxes, the tracking of lunar phases. But it fundamentally rejects the Babylonian premise. For Babylon, celestial motion was a language requiring interpretation, a system of signs pointing beyond itself. For Enoch, celestial motion was itself the divine order, not a message about something else but the thing itself, cosmic law made visible. The Astronomical Book also shows awareness of, and resistance to, Babylonian astrology. The text explicitly condemns the worship of celestial bodies and warns against treating them as sources of divinatory knowledge outside of their appointed functions. This is cosmic monotheism. The heavens reveal God's order, not their own will. They don't send omens, they display law. The difference is subtle but crucial. Egyptian astronomy offers a different parallel. Egyptian timekeeping was both solar and stellar, tracking the heliacal rising of Sirius to mark the flooding of the Nile, and using a 365-day civil calendar alongside religious lunar calendars. Egyptian cosmology embedded astronomical knowledge within creation mythology. The sky goddess Nut arching over the earth, the sun god Ra traveling through the underworld each night, the stars as souls of the deceased, or manifestations of divine powers. The Astronomical Book's imagery sometimes echoes Egyptian motifs. The sun traveling through gates recalls Ra's journey through the 12 hours of night, each hour a distinct realm with its own guardians. But again, the Hebrew text transforms the imagery. Egypt's cosmic geography was mythological and narrative. Enoch's is architectural and legal. Where Egyptian texts describe the sun's journey as a story with characters and conflicts, the Astronomical Book describes it as a schedule with gates and measurements. Greek astronomy presents yet another model. By the time the Astronomical Book was being composed, Hellenistic astronomers like Eudoxus and Aristarchus were developing geometric models of planetary motion, proposing heliocentric theories, calculating the Earth's circumference. Greek astronomy was moving toward mathematical abstraction, seeking universal physical laws that could explain celestial phenomena without reference to divine will or mythological narrative. The Astronomical Book occupies a fascinating middle ground. It shares Greek astronomy's interest in systematic explanation and mathematical order, but it refuses to strip the cosmos of moral and theological meaning. It shares Babylonian astronomy's conviction that celestial phenomena matter religiously, but it rejects divination and omen reading. It shares Egyptian astronomy's sense of cosmic narrative, but it replaces mythological drama with legal precision. What emerges is something unique: Hebrew astronomical theology, a vision where the heavens are neither mere objects of scientific study nor sites of polytheistic divine action, but testimony to singular divine order. The cosmos becomes Torah made visible, divine law written in stellar motion, accessible to those with eyes to see and revealed knowledge to understand. But this raises profound questions about the nature of the astronomical book itself. Is it science? The text makes empirical claims about celestial motion, describes observable phenomena, attempts systematic explanation, but its primary concern isn't prediction or understanding for its own sake, it's obedience and worship. Is it mythology? The text includes supernatural elements, angelic guides, revelatory visions, but it resists the narrative and personified quality of mythology, insisting on precision and schedule over story. Perhaps it's best understood as a third category: revelation dressed in astronomical language, using the heavens as an extended metaphor for divine order, employing scientific-sounding terminology to authorize sectarian claims. The calendar isn't just about tracking days. It's about claiming cosmic legitimacy for a community's practice. The gates of heaven aren't just explanatory models. They're proof that Qumran's way of life aligns with creation itself. This ambiguity, is it science? Is it symbolism? Is it revelation? Isn't a weakness of the text. It's its enduring power. By refusing to fit cleanly into modern categories, it challenges our assumptions about how ancient people thought about the cosmos and what they wanted from astronomical knowledge. They didn't separate facts from values, observations from meaning, the physical from the moral in the way we try to. Which brings us forward, uncomfortably, to our own moment. We've achieved the scientific precision they sought, mapping the cosmos to the edge of the observable universe, measuring time in infinitesimal fractions. But we've lost what they had: any sense that time itself might be sacred, that cosmic order could make moral claims, that the heavens might tell us not just what time it is, but what time means. What happens when a civilization knows everything about time except why it matters? Here's the uncomfortable parallel. The Qumran community felt themselves to be living in wrong time, surrounded by a society that had lost connection to cosmic order, observing festivals on corrupt dates, while the world around them celebrated on different days according to false calendars. They were temporal aliens in their own culture. We might know something about that feeling. Consider our contemporary relationship to time. We live under a regime of temporal precision, unprecedented in human history. Atomic clocks measure nanoseconds. GPS satellites maintain microsecond accuracy to function correctly. Global markets operate 24 hours a day across multiple time zones, money moving through digital networks at near light speed. We've achieved the chronometric exactitude that ancient civilizations could only dream of. And yet, we also live in what cultural theorists call the crisis of temporal experience. Time feels wrong. It's too fast. Information overload, digital acceleration, the relentless pace of news cycles, and social media feeds that make yesterday's events feel ancient. It's too fragmented. We're constantly context switching, managing multiple timelines, available always, unable to disconnect. It's too arbitrary. Our schedules determined by economic demands, productivity metrics, algorithmic feeds, rather than natural rhythms of day and night, season and harvest. We've lost connection to cosmic time. Most people in developed urban areas never see the Milky Way, light pollution erasing the night sky that every ancient human knew intimately. We can't track the moon's phases or identify constellations. Climate change disrupts seasonal patterns, making traditional agricultural calendars unreliable. The natural world that once provided temporal orientation has become invisible or unstable. The 24/7 economy doesn't care about circadian rhythms. Digital platforms don't respect Sabbath. The continuous partial attention demanded by always-on connectivity means we're never fully present in any single moment. Time becomes what sociologist Judy Weitzman calls an inescapable resource to be managed, something we're perpetually running out of, never something we inhabit or experience as meaningful. This is where the Astronomical Book's vision becomes hauntingly relevant. Not because we should adopt a 364-day solar calendar or start tracking gates of heaven, but because it represents a fundamentally different understanding of what time is for. For the Qumran community, time wasn't a resource to be managed. It was a structure of meaning to be inhabited. The calendar wasn't a scheduling tool. It was a way of aligning human life with cosmic order, of participating in creation's rhythm, of making every day a sacred orientation toward divine purposes. They asked, when should we celebrate festivals? We ask, how can we fit everything into our schedules? They worried about observing holy days at wrong times. We worry about not having enough time at all. Different problems, but both stemming from a sense that something about our temporal experience is fundamentally out of sync, corrupted, alienating. But here's the critical difference. The Qumran community believed there was a right time, a cosmic calendar that, if followed correctly, would restore them to proper relationship with divine order. We don't have that certainty. We know our time is fractured, but we're not sure there's any alternative except negotiating between competing demands, managing multiple temporal regimes, trying to carve out moments of rest and meaning within systems that resist them. The question becomes, is there wisdom in the Astronomical Book for us, or only nostalgia for a lost world where time could still feel whole? Consider what we might learn. First, the idea that time should have structure and rhythm, not just sequence. The 364-day calendar created recurring patterns, predictable cycles, built-in rhythms of work and rest. Contemporary experiments with Sabbath keeping, digital detoxes, and slow living movements are attempting to recover something similar. Temporal boundaries that create space for different kinds of experience, patterns that resist the flat, homogeneous time of constant productivity. Second, the conviction that time should align with something larger than human convenience. The solar calendar was meant to synchronize human practice with cosmic motion, making human life participatory in natural order. Modern environmental movements similarly argue for living in better relationship with ecological cycles, seasonal patterns, the non-human timescales of forests growing, rivers flowing, climate shifting. Not because the cosmos has moral agency, but because we're embedded in systems larger than ourselves, and ignoring their rhythms has consequences. Third, the recognition that disputes over time are never just technical. They're always also about authority, identity, and meaning. Who gets to decide what time it is? What purposes does timekeeping serve? The Qumran temple conflict was really about these deeper questions. So are contemporary debates about work-life balance, school schedules, the right to disconnect, whether capitalism's temporal demands are sustainable or humane. But we should also recognize the dangers in the Astronomical Book's vision. Its certainty becomes rigidity. Its cosmic order becomes cosmic law that permits no deviation. Its desire for perfect alignment becomes the source of schism, separation, a community so committed to being right that they exile themselves into the wilderness. There's wisdom in the temple's pragmatic approach too, recognizing that human timekeeping is always provisional, always requiring adjustment, always negotiated within communities rather than discovered in the heavens. Perhaps what we need isn't recovery of cosmic time in its ancient form, but something more modest and complex. Temporal practices that create meaning without demanding absolutism. Rhythms that provide structure without becoming rigid. Sacred times that orient us toward what we value, without dividing us into warring factions over who has the correct calendar. We can't go back to watching for new moons or tracking sun gates, but we can ask what time is for besides productivity and scheduling. We can create personal and communal practices that resist temporal homogenization. We can recognize that living well requires both precision and spaciousness, both structure and flexibility, both respect for natural rhythms, and acknowledgement that human time is always, to some degree, artificial and constructed. The Astronomical Book emerges from a moment of intense temporal anxiety, when a community felt that society had lost its way in time and needed to find a path back to cosmic order. We're in our own moment of temporal crisis, different in kind but similar in intensity. We won't find our answer in ancient calendars, but we might find something valuable in their insistence that time matters, that how we structure our days shapes who we become, that the question, "What time is it?" is always at some level asking, "What should we be doing and why?" We've journeyed with Enoch through the gates of heaven, watched the sun march through its ordained portals, witnessed the moon's 14-part cycle, explored the bitter conflict over calendars that divided ancient Judaism, asked whether stars can sin, compared Hebrew cosmology with Babylonian and Egyptian astronomy, and traced resonances between ancient temporal anxiety and our own fractured experience of time in the digital age. What remains at the end of this exploration isn't a simple conclusion, but an open question. What would it mean to live in sacred time now? The Astronomical Book offers no easy answer for us. It emerges from a specific historical moment, Second Temple Judaism's internal struggles, the Qumran community's sectarian commitment, ancient Israel's negotiation between inherited tradition and surrounding cultures. Its 364-day calendar isn't a solution we can simply adopt. Its confidence that cosmic order can be perfectly known and rigidly followed isn't a stance most of us can honestly maintain in a post-Einsteinian universe where time itself is relative, where quantum mechanics makes the cosmos stranger than any ancient cosmology imagined. But perhaps that's not the point. Perhaps what the Astronomical Book offers isn't a system to implement, but a question to sit with. Does time carry meaning beyond its measurement? Can chronology become cosmology? Is there any way to inhabit our days as something more than sequences to be managed, resources to be optimized, empty containers to be filled with productivity? The text insists that there is. It says that time is law, that cosmic order makes claims on us, that the heavens declare not just what time it is, but how we should live. It's a maximalist claim, maybe too strong for contemporary sensibilities. But even if we can't follow it all the way, we might follow it far enough to resist the opposite extreme, the idea that time is nothing but what we make it, that schedules are purely arbitrary, that there's no meaningful difference between living in rhythm and living in chaos. The Qumran community, in their isolated settlement near the Dead Sea, kept their solar calendar for about 2 centuries. They observed festivals when they believed God intended, regardless of what Jerusalem did. They copied and preserved the Astronomical Book, treating it as scripture alongside Torah and prophets. And then, in 68 CE, during the first Jewish revolt against Rome, their settlement was destroyed. The Roman legions swept through. The community scattered or died. The scrolls were hidden in caves, but the texts survived. Fragments of the Astronomical Book emerged from those caves in the 1940s and 50s, preserved by dry desert air for 2,000 years. And here's what's remarkable: the calendar they fought for, the temporal order they exiled themselves to maintain, the cosmic system they believed God revealed to Enoch, it didn't prevail. The lunar calendar continued in mainstream Judaism. Rabbinic tradition developed sophisticated intercalation methods. The solar calendar became a historical curiosity, a sectarian peculiarity, a lost vision preserved in texts, read by scholars, but followed by no one. Yet the question remained, still remains. What time is it really? Not just numerically, we can check our phones for that, but cosmically, morally, spiritually. What does it mean that we live in time at all, that we're creatures of rhythm and season, embedded in cycles larger than ourselves, capable of recognizing patterns and feeling when we're out of sync with them? The Astronomical Book can't answer that question for us, but it insists that the question matters, that our ancestors thought it mattered enough to split communities over it, to write visionary texts about it, to preserve those texts carefully enough that they survived catastrophes and millennia. It reminds us that time isn't neutral, isn't merely technical, isn't just a practical matter of coordination and convenience. The gates of heaven are still open, metaphorically speaking. Not the architectural portals Enoch walked through, but the possibility of seeing time as something more than duration, experiencing days as something more than units to be spent, finding rhythms that connect us to realities larger than individual will and social construction. We can't follow Enoch through those gates. We live too firmly in our own moment, with its own temporal peculiarities, its own crises and confusions. But we can recognize that his journey, however strange, however ancient, however embedded in conflicts we can barely reconstruct, was addressing something perennially human: the need to find meaning in time, to align ourselves with orders we didn't create but can choose to honor, to resist temporal regimes that crush us even as we develop temporal practices that sustain us. The Astronomical Book is a text about calendar wars fought 2 millennia ago by communities that no longer exist, preserving astronomical theories that were never quite accurate, promoting a temporal system that never became standard practice. It's ancient, obscure, sectarian, failed, but it asks a question that refuses to become obsolete. When you know what time it is, do you know what time means? And until we can answer that, really answer it, not just with words, but with how we live, the gates of heaven remain open, and the journey Enoch began continues, waiting for us to follow.